FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. It's 12/20/16. Well, you've looked at the papers, terror attacks around the globe, and hey, everything's great. The stock market keeps going up. Sounds like a perfect world, doesn't it? Well, hey, more on that perfection. Andrew Hoffman with us now. Andy, good morning.
Good morning. Well, you know what, Kerry? It was 5 years ago. Well, actually, I wrote the article maybe 3 or 4 years ago, but I was describing the point 5 years ago, which is in 2011, which I call the point of no return. And that's when 3 years after the financial crisis, the powers that be realized that everything they had done to that point to save the day had failed. I mean, they had initially, with all their QE and TARP and lowering interest rates to near zero, they had gotten a nice stock rally from 2009 until 2010, early 11. So they thought that the day was saved until they realized that we had all these banking crises crop up. Europe was on the verge of collapse. The Greek crisis came about. Then the U.S. lost its AAA credit rating, and everything was falling apart. And it was that point which I deemed the point of no return. And that was also when gold and silver hit their all-time highs. And at that point, the world became a 24/7 manipulation storm. And 5 years later, on every level, whether you're talking about the amount of debt, the level of currencies, the level of economic activity, the political instability, on every imaginable measure, things are much worse, except in what I deemed in another article a few years ago, last to go markets, which would be like the Dow Jones propaganda average and paper, gold, and silver. And in these glorious worlds, like the Dow's going to hit 20,000 today, and they're slamming paper, gold, and silver despite massive physical premiums around the world. In these markets, reality hasn't yet hit, but around the world in other markets, they certainly have. Bonds are getting crushed. Currencies are at all-time lows everywhere. We're just talking about the euro today, a new 14-year low. It's in free fall. The Great Britain pound is at basically an all-time low in the history of the British Isles. The yuan is about to go under 7 yuan per dollar. I'm reading an article that says Malaysian ringgit at lowest level since the Asian tigers crisis. Across the board, we're talking about just destroyed currencies and destroyed purchasing power and destroyed stock market values in real terms. But these last-to-go markets have been held up by the biggest bubble in history, and I think Dow 20,000 is going to be the symbolism for everything that's been wrong and everything that's about to go wrong in the coming years.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think this is the last hurrah here. And these last hurrahs always tend to get exaggerated, don't they?
Yeah, and it's kind of like, I was talking this morning. And again, I write every single day. I don't know if I've taken more than a day or two off all year. And I spent 8 hours doing my audio blog this weekend just to detail all these things that are going on so people understand. We're talking about the biggest bubbles in history, certainly in U.S. history in the last century. The valuations now in stocks are above those levels pretty much on any metric you're talking about, except if you talk about the 4 times where we had bubbles that burst in 1929, 87, 2000, and 2007. Those were during arguably the most prosperous times in American history. Now, I would argue that they were just fake prosperous times because, especially the last 2, because of all the money printing that was done at a time when you could print money because there was not a lot of debt out there and you could make it look like things were better. But the fact was, you talk about 2000, 1987, 2008, things were great. People had jobs, people were happy, they had wealth, they were buying things, and there was prosperity. We were peaceful with Europe, with Asia, with China, you name it. Currencies were stable. Here we have all of the worst of these worlds. We've never had more debt in history, and by a long shot. The global debt levels are pretty much, on average, double what they were at the time of the financial crisis, let alone what they were in 2000 and 1987. Currencies are pretty much across the board at all-time lows. In many cases, they're way below all-time lows. And we're talking about the level of economic activity, no matter how you measure it, is I mean, 2 years ago, I wrote an article that said it was called the worst economy of our lifetimes. And that, those were good times compared to now. And of course, all the political changes. Today, for instance, I see that in Holland, this guy Geert Wilders, who was just convicted last week of inciting violence against Muslims, he's gonna win and be the prime minister in March. I mean, that's how much people are angry about what's going on, and of course, what's going on in Italy and France and the Brexit, and here with Donald Trump. So we're talking about all these things are going on. Throw in the demographics and all kinds of things that are all going in the wrong direction, and yet they've managed to get the last to go market, the Dow, to the cusp of 20,000, and paper, gold, and silver, they are annihilating. While I'm looking every day at the physical premiums for silver. They're now over $2 an ounce in China, and they have been for more than a month, and almost $50 an ounce for gold. So something is going to give in 2017. Per my two articles of the last 2 weeks. One was called 2017, the year of money printing, and think of what that means compared to what has happened this year. And the other one was money printing and draconian government decree will define 2017, as in cash bans and all kinds of horrible things that no one could have imagined would happen in the first world.
Yeah, and here we are. I mean, look what's going on there in India. It's shocking. And it's going to happen everywhere, right?
Yeah, and again, no one knows how things will turn out. But I wrote in 2013. I say I wrote because I write 250 articles a year, and I've been doing it for 5 years at Miles Franklin. I've been doing it before that, so I got a lot of articles. Back in 2013, I wrote the upcoming Indian implosion, the upcoming Indian catastrophe, I should say, and I also wrote the world's worst government, talking about India, knowing that something very, very bad was going to happen in that. What I call financial apartheid. We have a handful of Western paper puppets, and pretty evil ones at that, trying to manage the finances of a 1.5 billion gold-loving Indians. I mean, look, the rupee's at an all-time low right now. It has nowhere to go but down, especially with what they just did. And they've accomplished nothing but essentially a police state, which is going to degrade into a bloody revolution. And all it's going to do is going to create even bigger black markets for gold and silver than the ones that have existed for the past 3 years, when they initiated those 10% import tariffs, which have done nothing but cause an increase in demand, particularly for silver. I mean, 2015, all-time high level of silver import demand into India, and it's only going to go higher now. And for that matter, I was reading yesterday, this guy Jandeep Bhandari, I think he's become the de facto point man for truth about India. He's saying that of the 1.3 billion people in India, a full billion of them live on $1 or $2 a day. That's how many poor people are there. So for all the talk about all the gold buying there, it's really concentrated in the hands of a very small amount of the population. And the rest of those people are, they're going to die. There's going to be bloody revolutions, and they're going to die. So you talk about political instability around the world. And that's just one nation. Think about what's going to happen in all these other nations. Just in Europe, I mean, when you look at the impact of the euro collapsing this badly and the British pound, and with it, even the Swiss franc.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing.
And those are the good places.
Yeah. Yeah, the so-called good places, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's like they've managed to sweep under the rug things like the Grexit, which, for a long time was considered the number one issue because, I mean, it still is just as big of an issue. They still have 450 billion euros of debt and another 150 billion off balance sheet. They owe it to the big banks like in Germany and France, like Deutsche Bank and the ECB itself. And, I've said for the last year, it's guaranteed that it's going to happen. And sure enough, they're in the middle of talks now for fourth bailout. The talks broke off before they even started. The people are angry because their oxy vote was ignored last year, and the country's gotten much worse. I mean, there may not even be a troika to administer a bailout, even if they wanted to, 6 or 12 months from now. So, what happens when just that one little tiny country goes? Or Italy. Last I looked, they just voted this referendum, which essentially is going to put into power the people who want to leave, and then Geert Wilders is going to win in March in Germany and in Holland, and then Marine Le Pen in France a month later. I mean, we're talking about the breakup of the European Union. This is very good for gold. Last I looked, and I've now done 3 articles titled "If a Nuclear Bomb Destroyed Europe." The last one was in a few weeks, maybe 2 weeks ago. Talking about how the concept of anyone saying a strong dollar is bad for gold when a strong dollar means weakness everywhere else. I mean, there are as many people in the world using the euro as the dollar. and the euro is free falling, and the same goes for the Indian rupee and the Chinese yuan and the Turkish lira and the Venezuelan bolivar and all these things. These people want to buy gold, and that's why the physical premiums are rising so much. And then you talk about the supply demand issue. First of all, down at these levels, I mean, does anyone remember a year ago when I was writing extensively about how the mining industry is on the verge of collapse? Well, we're back down to 1128 gold. Mining industry has barely gotten off the ground in a year's time. Most companies don't even have profits. Reserves have been plunging. They're going to plunge even more. And I just wrote an article this week, said the most important and gold bullish chart ever, showing what I've been looking for, my holy grail chart for the past 2 years, which is an estimate of what gold production is going to do. Because I've talked about extensively what Barrick's production is going to do, but the estimates that came out from the Standard & Poor's mining analysts are that, first of all, we peaked last year. Not it's coming, it peaked last year, but we are going to be down in gold production by 20% in the next decade. And that's not going to turn around no matter what the price does. Well, maybe it becomes 15% if the price soars. But we're talking about a dramatic decline in production at a time when inventories above ground available for sale are at all-time lows, and demand is the highest it's ever been, and it's only going to get higher given what's going on in the world. And that, that's not even where we are in silver. Silver's much worse. There's even less silver around than there is gold. And of course, if anyone wants to say, oh, well, they're going to confiscate gold and they're going to make controls on gold. Well, for one, I'll counter that they'll just be bigger black markets. But for two, they're not going to do them on silver. It's just going to make more people who would have bought gold buy silver, especially at these ridiculous prices. So, if there's one thing that I am not worried about more than ever in my career, certainly holding physical instead of paper precious metal investments, it's the outlook for physical gold and silver. And I think that the reversal that we're going to see from the base, we bottomed last year, and I think the reversal we're going to see from this ridiculous Trumpflation meme based on absolutely nothing but market rigging is going to be the biggest snapback in history, and it's going to be an historic year on so many levels between what's going to happen in the monetary arena, the political arena. And of course, the change in the global zeitgeist and what people believe, because so many people in the second and third world have already given up hope. And I think 2017 is going to be the year when any remaining hope in the Western world is shattered.
Yeah, well, hope and change, increasingly scarce commodities. You just have to wonder when it's all going to snap, because it's going to snap. I don't think there's any question about that. It will snap. And
yeah, maybe. Think about it. We have in March this debt ceiling suspension. Remember, they suspended it 2 years ago because they wanted to get through the showing just how bipartisan they are. They want to get through the election. Well, guess what? The debt ceiling of $20.1 trillion, which will be hit any day now, will be there at the time in March 15th. So what are they going to do? How's Trump going to get his big fiscal stimulus through when he's got to wrangle with Congress about the debt ceiling? How's he going to get a tax cut through? Are you kidding me? We're at record deficits this year. The national debt went up $1.4 trillion in the fiscal year ending September 30th. And now we're talking about tax cuts and increased fiscal spending. I mean, at this, I think every president, on average, the debt has gone up 10% a year for the past 40 years. Yeah. At that rate, we'll be close to 30 trillion by the time Trump gets through his first stimulus, his first 4 years. And that would be without any fiscal stimulus. And, when I also talk about, I've written, lately I wrote an article about the base metal bubble, because as much as the stock bubble is incredible, but it is in fact supported by a lot by the PPT. I don't think there's anyone out there who's supporting copper prices like I gotta, bid them up to get confidence up. They're obviously thin markets that are being played with, but to see copper and zinc soaring like they are, when silver is as industrial, more industrial as they are. And when you think about it, I put it in my article today, China from 2008, when you had the financial crisis, the Chinese government, when you talk about the debt of China, it's the debt of China plus the corporations, because it's kind of like, the state-owned enterprises. Everything's a state-owned enterprise. Yeah, so when you combine them, the debt to GDP of China since 2008 has gone from 150% to 270%. And by the way, they've admitted, like us, that they overstate their GDP. So they've almost doubled their debt. They've got like $28 trillion of debt. And over that time, the price of copper has gone from $4 a pound to $2 a pound. It hit $2 a pound, or $2.05 or $2.03, just 2 or 3 months ago. So now we're to believe that because Trump wants to do some tiny, I mean, we're talking about to even put into the same discussion, the tiny little nothing stimulus that Trump's proposing. And he hasn't even really proposed anything yet.
No.
And to believe that copper should go from $2 up to $2.60 or zinc to almost double in price based on this is so unbelievably insane. I mean, you have China out there admitting, I've written about this, they put in their state papers, we are entering a major financial economic downturn that's going to take a while. So China's not even in the picture anymore. And based on this hope, we're to believe that zinc and copper are exploding, and that silver, which is as industrial as they are, because 3/4 of production is used for industrial uses, gets smashed. I mean, we're talking about the biggest disparities in the history of financial markets out there. And it's all going on as I look at interest rates surging as they are this morning, at currencies plunging as they are this morning. Look at all the terrorist attacks and the political regime changes going on.
That's madness.
It's incredible what is going to happen in 2017. And for people in America, people around the world having trouble getting, God, you're in India and China, you're struggling to find gold and silver per the premiums are out there. And meanwhile, over here, you can buy them at nothing prices, and people have no interest. It's at this moment, of course, but they will.
Yes. Yeah, this is all true, Andy. So you think after the new year sometime it's going to start to come unwound here, or they just going to keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it? I mean, what's going to be here?
Well, they always keep pushing it and pushing it. And, it's one of these things, everything's unprecedented. So no one knows how things will play out. I'm just saying there's so many catalysts. And, one of the biggest will be the fact that if people are in fact that enthused, and I say people, I mean, there's a tiny bit of people still left in the financial market, since the hedge funds have all blown up over the years by not understanding the rigging of the markets. But, the financial markets and the rigging that goes along with it, I mean, there's just too many things that are happening that are going to shatter this illusion. I mean, again, we're talking about everyone's confident about Trump, right? And you see all these confidence surveys, incredible, surging. You haven't seen this much confidence since Obama or before Obama. And yet the real data still stinks. Yeah. The retail spending stinks. The holiday shopping is stunk. Industrial production was down again. Across the board, where all you see is hope and optimism, as you did when Obama came in, as when George Bush came in, as when Ronald Reagan came in. Everyone's always hopeful and optimistic, but it's not based on anything. And there's less reason to be hopeful and optimistic now than there ever has been.
Ain't that the truth? So, well, let's end on a bright note here, if you can find one.
Yes.
Yes.
What is it?
I don't know. I'm trying to think of it here. Well, hey.
Is it Bitcoin? Bitcoin is what gold will do when it breaks from the cartel, and it will break from the cartel. It's that simple.
Yeah. So where's Bitcoin at now?
It's closing in on 800. It's remarkable to watch unmanipulated markets because there's so few of them out there. I'm as much interested in that aspect of it as I am in what it's doing, because, I'm a career financial analyst. I spent 20 years on Wall Street, you can characterize everything I've done as Wall Street. So it's almost 30 years. I'm a CFA, I did my time studying markets, and it's so nice to see something that's not rigged out there.
Yeah. Few and far between, right?
Yes.
Few and far between. Well, I guess we'll leave it on that. Just wish everybody a happy holiday, and we'll be back next week with more good cheer. And Andy, just enjoy it while it's here. Enjoy the time with your family. The rest of it doesn't really matter. And hey, we will just do what we do, and we'll keep doing it. That's all there is to it. So, hey, take a look at Andy's work over at milesfranklin.com, and take a look at our work over at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. And that's where you find us. Andy, we'll resume next week. Same time.
We'll do our final one of the year next week.
Final one. We'll talk about what's going to come for the coming year. And hey, we'll talk to you then. Be well.
You too.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.